Danielle Wilson drove with both hands on the wheel, the clock on her dashboard reading 11:37 p.m. Her eyes felt heavy after 14 hours at the law firm where she worked as an environmental attorney. The streets of Memphis were quiet on this Tuesday night, most people already home and in bed. She had stayed late to finish paperwork for a case against a company dumping chemicals in the Tennessee River. The radio played softly as she thought about the hot shower waiting for her at home. The headlights of a police cruiser suddenly appeared in her rearview mirror, blue and red lights flashing. Danielle checked her speed. She was going 5 miles under the limit. She signaled and pulled over to the side of the road, her heart rate picking up slightly. This was nothing to worry about, she told herself. Probably just a taillight out or something minor. She'd been through traffic stops before. She rolled down her window and turned off the engine, placing both hands back on the steering wheel where they could be seen. The cool night air drifted in as she watched the officer approach in her side mirror. "License and registration," the officer said, shining a flashlight directly into her eyes. He was a heavy-set white man, maybe in his 40s, with a crew cut. His nameplate read Officer Brennan. "Of course," Danielle said, keeping her voice steady. "My registration is in the glove compartment, and my license is in my purse on the passenger seat. I'm going to reach for them now, if that's okay." The officer nodded, his flashlight beam never leaving her face. Danielle moved slowly, retrieving the documents and handing them over. "Do you know why I pulled you over tonight, ma'am?" Officer Brennan asked, studying her license. "No, sir, I don't," Danielle replied. "Was I speeding?" "You rolled through that stop sign back at Pine and Jefferson." His tone was flat, matter-of-fact. Danielle frowned. She was certain she had come to a complete stop at every intersection. She'd been extra careful driving while tired. "I'm sorry, officer, but I'm positive I stopped completely. I've been very careful tonight because I'm coming home from a long day at work." The officer's expression hardened. "Step out of the vehicle, please. May I ask why?" Danielle said, confusion creeping into her voice. This wasn't how routine traffic stops went. "I smell marijuana coming from your vehicle," Officer Brennan said. Danielle blinked in surprise. "There's no marijuana in my car, officer. I don't use drugs. I'm an attorney." "Step out of the vehicle now," he repeated, his hand moving to rest on his holster. A second patrol car pulled up behind the first, its lights also flashing. Another officer emerged and approached, a younger man with a buzz cut who walked with a swagger. "Everything okay, Brennan?" the second officer called out. "Got a lawyer here who doesn't want to comply?" Officer Brennan replied, not taking his eyes off Danielle. Danielle took a deep breath. She knew her rights, but she also knew that this situation was escalating quickly. As a black woman, she'd heard too many stories that started like this and ended badly. "I'm complying, officer," she said calmly. "I'm going to step out now." She unbuckled her seatbelt and opened the door slowly, keeping her movements deliberate. The night air felt colder now as she stood by her car, arms slightly away from her sides. "I need to check your vehicle," Officer Brennan said. "Do you consent to a search?" "No, I don't consent," Danielle replied firmly. "There's no probable cause to search my car. I haven't done anything wrong." The second officer stepped closer. "You refusing a search makes us think you're hiding something." "That's not how the law works," Danielle said, trying to keep her voice level. "Refusing a search is my constitutional right." "Put your hands on the hood," Officer Brennan ordered, his voice rising. "Now." Across the street, a man walking his dog had stopped to watch. He pulled out his phone and began recording, staying at a distance. Danielle placed her hands on the hood as instructed. "This is unnecessary. I was just driving home from work. Spread your legs," the officer commanded, moving behind her. Danielle complied, her mind racing. This wasn't right. This wasn't legal, but challenging them further might make things worse. "I'm going to pat you down for weapons," Officer Brennan said, beginning to search her. "This is harassment," Danielle said, her voice stronger now. "You pulled me over for allegedly rolling through a stop sign. There's no reason to search me or my vehicle." "Keep your mouth shut," the second officer snapped, moving closer. A third police car arrived, lights flashing silently. A female officer stepped out and approached. "What do we have here?" she asked. "Potential DUI. Possible narcotics," Officer Brennan replied, though he had never mentioned thinking Danielle was drunk before this moment. "I am completely sober," Danielle protested. "You can breathalyze me. This is profiling and you know it." She's being combative, the second officer said, grabbing Danielle's arm roughly. Don't touch me, Danielle said, instinctively pulling away. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. The second officer yanked her arm back hard, sending a shock of pain through her shoulder. Officer Brennan shoved her against the car. Stop resisting, he shouted, though she wasn't fighting back. I'm not resisting, Danielle cried out as they forced her to the ground. Her cheek hit the pavement hard. She felt a knee press into her back, driving the air from her lungs. Someone grabbed her hair, slamming her head down again. Pain exploded behind her eyes. Stop! Please stop! She gasped. Across the street, the man with the dog had moved closer, still recording. Hey, he shouted. She's not fighting you. Leave her alone. The officers ignored him. Danielle felt her arms being wrenched behind her back, cold metal handcuffs biting into her wrists. Someone's knee pressed harder into her spine. A blow struck her ribs, whether a fist or a knee she couldn't tell. She cried out in pain. Shut up, one of the officers hissed. Danielle's thoughts spun wildly. This couldn't be happening. Not to her. Not in 2025. She had done everything right. Gotten an education, built a career, followed the law. None of that mattered now as she lay face down on the cold pavement. She thought of her father. What would he do if he could see her now? The irony was almost too much to bear. Her father, General Thomas Wilson, had just been appointed as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the highest-ranking military officer in the United States. He advised the president directly. He commanded respect from leaders around the world, and his daughter was being beaten on the side of the road by police officers who had no idea who she was. Danielle had never used her father's position for special treatment. She had built her own life, her own career, separate from his shadow. She had never even mentioned him during job interviews. She wanted to succeed or fail on her own merits. Now, as the officers roughly pulled her to her feet, her face throbbing and blood trickling from her split lip, she wondered if she should say something. Would it make a difference? Would they even believe her? No, she decided. This wasn't about who her father was. This was about human dignity, about rights that should belong to everyone, not just those with powerful connections. The female officer searched through Danielle's purse, dumping the contents onto the hood of the patrol car. Clean, she reported, sounding almost disappointed. They searched her car next despite her refusal of consent. Danielle stood handcuffed beside a patrol car, watching as they rifled through her belongings, tossing aside case files and personal items. Nothing here, one of them finally said. The man across the street was still recording. 2 more bystanders had joined him, their phones held up like shields. You're still under arrest, Officer Brennan told Danielle. Resisting arrest and assaulting an officer. That's ridiculous, Danielle said, tasting blood. I didn't assault anyone. You assaulted me. Those people saw everything. Get her in the car, Brennan ordered, ignoring her words. The second officer grabbed her arm again, pushing her toward the patrol car. Pain shot through her shoulder. You're hurting me, she said through clenched teeth. Should have thought about that before you decided to fight us, he replied, though they all knew she hadn't fought at all. As they pushed her into the back seat of the patrol car, Danielle caught a glimpse of the bystanders. Their faces showed shock, anger, concern. The first man, the one with the dog, gave her a nod that seemed to say, I got it all on video. I won't let this disappear. Danielle sat in silence as they drove to the station, her body aching, her mind clear despite everything. She knew what would happen next. They would book her, take her fingerprints, put her in a cell. She would get one phone call. Who would she call? Her father was in Washington for high-level meetings. Her mother had passed away years ago. She had friends, colleagues, but calling them would mean explaining everything, and right now, she couldn't bear to relive it. As the patrol car pulled into the station's parking lot, Danielle made a decision. She would not mention her father, not to get special treatment, not to scare these officers straight. This wasn't about being a general's daughter. This was about being a citizen whose rights had been violated. If this could happen to her, a lawyer who knew her rights, who had done nothing wrong, what happened to people without her education? Without her resources? Without bystanders recording? This wasn't just about tonight anymore. This was about something much bigger. And as they led her, still handcuffed, into the station, Danielle Wilson made a silent promise to herself. When this was over, She would fight not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been in her position, with or without a powerful father in Washington. No one in that police station knew they had just arrested the daughter of the most powerful military officer in the United States. But soon the whole country would know her story. The fluorescent lights of the police station buzzed overhead as Danielle sat on a hard metal bench, her wrists still raw from the handcuffs. They had taken her belongings, purse, phone, even her watch, and given her a paper receipt. The booking process had been cold and mechanical. Fingerprints, mugshot. Questions she answered in a voice that sounded distant to her own ears. Her face throbbed where it had hit the pavement. Her ribs ached when she breathed too deeply. She had asked for medical attention twice, but the desk sergeant had barely looked up from his computer. "Doctor's not in until morning," he had said. "You'll live." Now she waited, one among many in the holding area. Across from her, a young man dozed against the wall, his clothes stained and rumpled. In the corner, an older woman muttered to herself, occasionally laughing at something no one else could hear. A teenager with red-rimmed eyes kept checking the clock on the wall, his leg bouncing nervously. Danielle closed her eyes, trying to center herself. She was a lawyer. She knew how the system worked and how it didn't work. She knew what to say and what not to say, yet knowledge didn't ease the ache in her body or the churning in her stomach. "Wilson," a voice called. Danielle opened her eyes. A tired-looking woman in an ill-fitting suit stood by the door, a folder in her hand. "I'm Danielle Wilson," she said, standing carefully to avoid wincing. "Rita Patel." "Public defender," the woman said, not offering her hand. "Let's talk." They were led to a small room with a table bolted to the floor and two metal chairs. The walls were a sickly shade of beige, stained in places with what Danielle hoped was just coffee. Once the door closed behind them, Rita sighed and sat down, flipping open the folder. "They've charged you with resisting arrest, assaulting an officer, and disorderly conduct," she said without preamble. "First offense?" "I didn't do any of those things," Danielle said. "And yes, I've never been arrested before. I'm an attorney." Rita looked up, really seeing Danielle for the first time. She noted the bruising on Danielle's face, the way she held herself carefully to avoid pain. "Environmental law," Danielle added. "With Harrington and Beck downtown." Rita's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's a good firm." She leaned forward. "Look, Ms. Wilson, I've got 17 cases today. I can try to get you a bail hearing in the morning. Given your profession and lack of record, you'll probably get out on your own recognizance." "I want to file a complaint against the officers," Danielle said. "They used excessive force during a routine traffic stop. There were witnesses. Someone was recording." Rita's expression turned weary. "That's something to discuss after we deal with your charges. Right now, let's focus on getting you processed and out of here." "I understand," Danielle said, recognizing the reality of the situation. The system moved at its own pace, grinding slowly over the people caught in it. "Can I make my phone call now?" 20 minutes later, Danielle stood at a payphone attached to the wall, trying to decide who to call. Her father was out of the question. He was in closed-door meetings in Washington, unreachable until morning. She thought of calling her firm, but something held her back. This was personal, humiliating. She wasn't ready for colleagues to know. In the end, she called her neighbor Vivian, a night nurse who would be getting home from her shift around now. "Hello?" Vivian's voice was cautious, not recognizing the police station number. "Vivian, it's Danielle. I'm sorry to call so early in the morning, but I need help." After explaining where she was, Danielle asked Vivian to feed her cat and bring her some clean clothes for the morning. She didn't go into details about what had happened. "I'll be there, honey," Vivian promised. "Do you need me to call anyone for you?" "No," Danielle said. "Not yet. Thank you." When she hung up, an officer led her to a cell where 3 other women were already waiting. One slept on the single bench, another sat cross-legged on the floor, and the third stood looking out the small window high on the wall. They barely glanced at Danielle as she entered. Danielle found a spot against the wall and slid down to sit on the floor, trying to find a position that didn't hurt. Sleep seemed impossible, but she closed her eyes anyway, letting her mind drift to her father. General Thomas Wilson was probably reviewing military strategies or advising the president right now, unaware that his daughter was sitting in a jail cell with bruises on her face. They had always been close, especially after her mother died. He had supported her decision to become an environmental lawyer, instead of following him into the military. "Fight your battles in the courtroom," he had told her with a smile. "I'll handle the ones overseas." What would he do when he found out? Rage, certainly. He had a famous temper when it came to injustice, but he had also taught her about dignity, about standing up for principles rather than privilege. That's why she hadn't mentioned his name. Not to the officers, not to the booking sergeant, not even to her public defender. This wasn't about being General Wilson's daughter. This was about being Danielle Wilson, citizen. Morning came with harsh fluorescent lights flickering on and a guard's voice calling out for breakfast. Danielle had dozed fitfully, waking often to the sounds of new arrivals or the moans of the woman now curled in the corner. They were given trays with something resembling oatmeal and small cartons of milk. Danielle couldn't eat, her split lip making it painful and her stomach too knotted with anxiety. Outside the holding cells, the world was waking up. And unknown to Danielle, things were already happening. Across town, Luis Menendez, the man who had been walking his dog when Danielle was arrested, had uploaded his video to social media before going to bed. He had added a simple caption: "Woman beaten by police tonight for nothing. Happened at Pine and Jefferson around midnight. Share this." By morning, the video had thousands of views and shares. Local activists were already identifying the officers involved. A reporter from the Memphis Daily News had seen it and begun making calls. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., General Thomas Wilson sat in a secure briefing room beneath the Pentagon, reviewing threat assessments with the Secretary of Defense and other military leaders. His phone, like all devices, had been left outside the room for security reasons. His aide, Lieutenant Colonel Priya Verma, sat in an anteroom with those phones, monitoring for urgent messages. When the general's phone lit up with repeated calls from an unknown Memphis number, she initially ignored it. But when the calls persisted, followed by text messages marked urgent, she became concerned. The text read, "General Wilson, this is Detective Raymond Jackson, Memphis Police Department. There is a situation involving your daughter that requires your immediate attention. Please call this number as soon as possible." Colonel Verma hesitated, only briefly before walking to the secure briefing room and quietly informing the security officer at the door that there was an urgent family matter for General Wilson. Moments later, the general stepped out, his face a mask of professional calm that immediately fell away when Colonel Verma handed him his phone. "What's happened to Danielle?" he asked after reading the text, his voice tight. "I don't know, sir," she replied, "but there's something else you should see." She handed him her own phone, open to the social media post that was now going viral. "This was posted a few hours ago. I recognized her, sir." General Wilson watched the video, his face growing more still with each second. Anyone who didn't know him might think he was merely concentrating. Colonel Verma, who had served with him for 3 years, recognized the cold fury building behind his eyes. When the video ended, he handed back the phone without a word and dialed the detective's number. "This is General Wilson," he said when the call connected, his voice perfectly controlled. "I understand you have information about my daughter." Back in Memphis, Danielle was being led to a small courtroom for her bail hearing. She had been given a chance to wash her face, but without a mirror, she couldn't tell how bad she looked. From the way people glanced at her and then quickly away, she guessed it was worse than she thought. Rita Patel met her outside the courtroom, looking slightly more alert than she had the night before. "Something's going on," she said in a low voice. "The DA's office called. They're sending someone over, and there's a detective asking questions about your case." "What does that mean?" Danielle asked. Rita shook her head. "I'm not sure yet. But bail hearings don't usually get this kind of attention." Inside the courtroom, Danielle was surprised to see Vivian sitting in the back row. Her neighbor gave her a small wave and a look of sympathy. More surprising was the presence of a man in an expensive suit sitting in the front row, watching her intently. He wasn't a regular courthouse fixture. Danielle would have recognized him from her own work in these courts. When her case was called, Rita stepped forward with Danielle, beginning her standard introduction. But before she could get far, the courtroom doors opened, and a harried-looking man hurried in, whispering something to the prosecutor, who looked startled. The judge, a woman with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, frowned at the interruption. "Your Honor," the prosecutor said, standing, "in the matter of Danielle Wilson, the state wishes to drop all charges at this time, pending further investigation." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Rita looked as surprised as Danielle felt. "May I ask the reason for this sudden change, counselor?" the judge asked. The prosecutor cleared his throat. "New evidence has come to light that calls into question the circumstances of Ms. Wilson's arrest." The judge studied the prosecutor for a moment, then looked at Danielle. "Very well, Ms. Wilson, you are free to go." Next case, just like that, it was over. Or rather, one part was over. As Danielle left the courtroom with Rita, the man in the expensive suit approached them. "Ms. Wilson, I'm Anthony Chen from the mayor's office. If you have a moment, the mayor would like to speak with you." Danielle looked at him steadily. "Why?" Anthony shifted uncomfortably. "It seems your arrest has generated some attention. There's a video circulating online." "I see," Danielle said. "And does the mayor know who my father is? Is that why I'm suddenly getting special treatment?" The flash of surprise on Anthony's face told her everything. Somehow they had found out. Her connection to General Wilson was now public knowledge. The rules had changed overnight. Danielle felt a wave of emotion, relief at being free, anger at the system that only worked properly for those with connections, and a deep, burning determination to use what had happened to her to make real change. "Tell the mayor I'll speak with him," she said. "But first I need to go home, shower, and change. And then I want to file a formal complaint against the officers who arrested me." As she walked away with Vivian, Danielle knew that her story was just beginning. The next chapters would be played out not just in Memphis but across the nation. The general's daughter had been beaten by police, and now everyone knew it. The question was, what would she and her father do about it? Hot water cascaded over Danielle's bruised body as she stood under the shower in her apartment, letting it wash away the grime of the holding cell. She closed her eyes, the water mixing with silent tears of relief, anger, and exhaustion. After 24 hours that had changed her life, she was finally home. Her cat, Midnight, had greeted her at the door with suspicious meows, as if demanding an explanation for her absence. Vivian had helped her inside, made her tea, and left only after making sure Danielle didn't need medical attention. "The hospital can wait," Danielle had assured her. "I just need to be home right now." Now alone, she carefully dried herself and examined her injuries in the bathroom mirror. Her left cheek was swollen and discolored, her bottom lip split at the corner. Ugly purple bruises bloomed across her ribs and back where the officers had knelt on her and struck her. They would heal eventually. The memory of how she got them never would. Her phone, returned with her other belongings, had been buzzing constantly since she got home. She ignored it until she was dressed in soft, loose clothing that didn't press on her bruises. Only then did she look at the screen. 37 missed calls. Over 100 text messages. Notifications from every social media account she had. She scrolled through the messages. Colleagues from her law firm. Friends from college. Reporters from local news stations. Even a few numbers she didn't recognize, somehow having gotten her private contact information. One message stood out, from her father. Simple and direct. "I'm on my way to Memphis. Landing at 2:30. We'll get through this together. Love you." Danielle checked the time. It was just past noon. In less than 3 hours, General Thomas Wilson would be here, and everything would become even more complicated. She made another cup of tea and settled carefully on her couch, finally ready to see what everyone was talking about. She opened the social media app where the video had first been posted. The footage was shaky at first, clearly taken by someone who had pulled out their phone in a hurry. It showed her car pulled over, the police lights flashing in the darkness. Then Danielle herself, standing with her hands on the hood. The confrontation. The sudden violence as the officers forced her to the ground. The clear sound of her voice saying, "I'm not resisting." The knee on her back. The blow to her side. The video had been viewed over 2 million times. The comment section was a battlefield of outrage, calls for justice, and the inevitable trolls defending the police or making racist remarks. Local news websites had picked up the story, initially running headlines like, "Woman alleges police brutality during traffic stop." But as her identity had become known, the headlines had changed. Daughter of Joint Chiefs Chairman beaten by Memphis police and General's daughter assaulted during arrest. Charges dropped. The story was spreading to national news now. Her phone rang again, CNN this time. She declined the call. A text came through from Anthony Chen at the mayor's office. "Mayor Lewis is available to meet whenever you're ready. Please call to arrange." The police chief will also be present. Danielle set her phone down, feeling overwhelmed. 24 hours ago, she had been a regular attorney driving home from work. Now she was at the center of a growing media storm. Her doorbell rang, startling her. She wasn't expecting anyone, and her father wouldn't arrive for hours yet. Cautiously, she went to the door and looked through the peephole. 2 people stood in the hallway. A tall black woman with short natural hair and a slender Latino man with glasses. They didn't look like reporters. Who is it? Danielle called through the door. Ms. Wilson? I'm Tanya Washington with the Memphis Civil Rights Coalition. This is my colleague, Carlos Diaz. We'd like to speak with you about what happened last night, if you're willing. Danielle hesitated. She wasn't ready to become a cause or a symbol, but she needed allies who understood what she was facing. She opened the door. I have about an hour, she said. Come in. Tanya and Carlos were respectful, not pushing when Danielle didn't want to answer certain questions. They explained that their organization had been documenting cases of police misconduct in Memphis for years. Your case is getting attention because of who your father is, Tanya said frankly. But we have files on dozens of similar incidents that never made the news. People who didn't get their charges magically dropped. That's exactly what bothers me, Danielle admitted. The system suddenly worked for me because of my connections. What about everyone else? Carlos nodded. That's why we're here. We think your case could be a turning point if you're willing to work with us. Before Danielle could respond, her phone rang again. Her father. I need to take this, she said, stepping into the kitchen. Danielle. Her father's voice was steady, but she could hear the tension underneath. I'm boarding the plane now. How are you holding up? I'm okay, Dad, she said, trying to keep her own voice even. Bruised, but okay. I've been on the phone with the mayor, the police chief, and the governor, he said. They're falling over themselves to apologize. The officers have been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Danielle leaned against the counter. That's not enough, I know. There was a pause. The Department of Justice is looking into it. I spoke with the Attorney General, of course he had. Her father had the ear of the most powerful people in the country. Dad, there are people here from a civil rights organization. They want to work with me on this case. Another pause. Be careful, Danielle. This is already becoming a media circus. We need to handle it strategically. I'm not handling it as a strategy, she said, a edge creeping into her voice. I'm handling it as something that happened to me, and happens to people every day who don't have a 4-star general for a father. She heard him sigh. We'll talk when I get there. I love you. Love you too, Dad. When she returned to the living room, Tanya and Carlos were waiting patiently. That was my father, she explained. He's flying in from Washington. Tanya nodded. General Wilson's involvement will keep this story in the headlines. But Ms. Wilson, we want to make sure this leads to real change, not just a news cycle. Call me Danielle, she said, making up her mind. And I agree. Tell me what you think we should do. By the time her father's car pulled up outside her apartment building, Danielle had a plan. She went downstairs to meet him, knowing that cameras might already be watching. General Thomas Wilson stepped out of the black SUV, wearing civilian clothes, jeans, and a button-down shirt rather than his uniform. At 62, he was still fit and imposing, with close-cropped gray hair and the straight posture of a lifetime soldier. When he saw Danielle, his controlled expression faltered for just a moment. Dad, she said, stepping into his embrace. He held her carefully, mindful of her injuries. Let me look at you, he said, pulling back to examine her face. The muscle in his jaw tightened as he took in the bruising. Let's go upstairs, she said, aware of faces watching from windows across the street. In her apartment, her father paced while she made coffee. He had always been a man of action, uncomfortable with situations he couldn't control with orders or strategy. The officers' body cameras mysteriously malfunctioned, he said. All 3 of them at the same time. But they didn't count on witnesses with phones. That happens more often than you'd think, Danielle said, handing him a mug. The cameras malfunction whenever the footage might incriminate the officers. Her father took the coffee but didn't drink. I've arranged for the best doctors and I have a team of lawyers flying in from Washington. Dad, Danielle interrupted gently. I've already made some decisions about how I want to handle this. He stopped pacing and looked at her. I've spoken with the Memphis Civil Rights Coalition. They've been documenting cases like mine for years. I want to work with them. Danielle, these local organizations don't have the resources or connections. That's exactly why I need to work with them, she insisted. They have what we don't have, the history, the community trust, the knowledge of what's really happening on the streets. And we have what they don't have: visibility, resources, and yes, your connections. Her father sat down across from her, studying her face. You always were stubborn, he said finally. Like your mother. Danielle smiled slightly despite her split lip. I learned from both of you. Tell me your plan, he said. She outlined what she and the coalition had discussed, using her case to shine a light on the pattern of similar incidents, pushing for specific policy changes in the Memphis Police Department, and creating a civilian oversight board with real power. This isn't just about punishing those 3 officers, she explained. It's about changing the system that lets them operate this way. Her father listened without interrupting, his face thoughtful. When she finished, he nodded slowly. It's a good approach, he admitted. But the media will try to make this about me, about special treatment. They'll say you're only getting attention because of who I am. That's exactly the point, Danielle said. I want to acknowledge that privilege openly and use it to help those who don't have it. I won't pretend this is just about me. A knock at the door interrupted them. Danielle opened it to find Anthony Chen from the mayor's office, looking anxious. Ms. Wilson, General, he said with a quick nod to her father. Mayor Lewis is asking if you're available to meet now. The police chief and district attorney will be there. Danielle and her father exchanged a look. Tell the mayor we'll be there in an hour, General Wilson said. And Mr. Chen, make sure the press knows about this meeting. After Anthony left, Danielle raised an eyebrow at her father. Going public already? He smiled grimly. You wanted visibility for this cause. Let's use every tool we have. As they prepared to leave for the meeting, Danielle's phone buzzed with a news alert. The video of her arrest had now been viewed 10 million times. National news networks were picking up the story. Justice for Danielle was trending on social media. Are you ready for this? Her father asked as they headed for the door. Once we step outside, nothing will be private anymore. Danielle took a deep breath, wincing slightly at the pain in her ribs. I'm ready. This isn't just about us anymore. Together, they stepped out to face the cameras that were already gathering on the street below, ready to tell their story, not just as a general and his daughter, but as 2 Americans fighting for a justice system that worked for everyone. Camera flashes erupted like lightning as Danielle and her father walked into City Hall. Reporters shouted questions, microphones thrust forward, but General Wilson guided his daughter through the crowd with a protective arm around her shoulders. His face was a mask of calm determination. Hers showed the bruises from her arrest, which she had deliberately not covered with makeup. Let them see, she had decided. Let everyone see. Inside, Mayor Lewis waited in his office with Police Chief Rodriguez and District Attorney Philip Barnes. The mayor, a heavy-set man with a politician's smile, rushed forward to shake General Wilson's hand. General, I cannot express how deeply sorry I am about this incident, he began, his voice oozing sincerity. I assure you we're taking this very seriously. The general's handshake was brief. This isn't about me, Mayor Lewis, it's about my daughter. The mayor turned to Danielle, his expression softening with practiced concern. Ms. Wilson, on behalf of the city of Memphis, I want to apologize for your experience. The officers involved have been placed on administrative leave while we conduct a thorough investigation. Administrative leave, Danielle repeated. With pay? Chief Rodriguez stepped forward. A trim woman in her 50s with short black hair streaked with gray, she had the weary look of someone who had seen too much. That's standard procedure during an investigation, Ms. Wilson. We need to follow proper protocols. The same protocols that failed when 3 body cameras mysteriously malfunctioned at the same time? General Wilson asked, his voice deceptively mild. The chief had the grace to look uncomfortable. We're looking into that as well. District Attorney Barnes, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat. We're reviewing all the evidence, including the video taken by bystanders. If there was misconduct, we will take appropriate action. If, Danielle said. The word hung in the air. The mayor gestured to the conference table. Please, let's sit and discuss how to move forward. Once they were seated, Danielle placed a folder on the table. Before we begin, I want to be clear about my expectations. The 3 city officials exchanged glances. I'm not interested in special treatment because of who my father is, she continued. I'm interested in justice, not just for me, but for everyone who has experienced police misconduct in this city. She opened the folder and took out several documents, which she pushed across the table. This is data compiled by the Memphis Civil Rights Coalition. In the past 5 years, there have been 147 complaints of excessive force filed against Memphis police officers. Of those, only 11 resulted in any disciplinary action. None led to termination or criminal charges. The mayor looked uncomfortable. Ms. Wilson, I understand your concern, but each case is unique. I'm not finished, Danielle said firmly. I've also brought a list of policy changes that we believe would address the systemic issues within the department. Body cameras that can't be turned off during interactions with the public, mandatory reporting of all use of force incidents, an independent civilian review board with real power to investigate complaints. Chief Rodriguez frowned. Many of these proposals would require union negotiations, budget increases. Money wasn't an issue when you militarized the police force, General Wilson interrupted. Somehow the budget appeared for tactical gear and armored vehicles. The room fell silent for a moment. District Attorney Barnes adjusted his glasses. What exactly are you asking for here, Ms. Wilson? Beyond policy changes that may take months or years to implement? Danielle met his gaze steadily. Immediate suspension without pay for the officers involved. A public commitment to the policy changes I've outlined, and a special prosecutor appointed to investigate this case since your office works too closely with the police department to be truly independent. Mayor Lewis's political smile had vanished. Those are significant demands. They're necessary steps, Danielle countered. And they're just the beginning. The meeting continued for another hour, a tense back and forth of proposals and pushback. Throughout, Danielle remained firm but professional, drawing on her legal training. Her father spoke less but with authority when he did, his military rank an unspoken weight behind his words. By the end, they had secured a commitment for an independent investigation, though the other demands remained under consideration. As they prepared to leave, Chief Rodriguez approached Danielle privately. You should know, she said quietly, that I've been trying to implement some of these changes for years. The system resists from all sides, the union, the old guard, budget constraints. Maybe your voice will finally break through. Danielle studied the woman, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. Then work with us, not against us. Outside, the media waited. Cameras rolled as Danielle and her father stepped to the microphones. We've had a productive meeting with city officials, General Wilson began. But this is just the first step in a longer journey toward accountability and justice. He stepped back and Danielle moved forward. The cameras captured her bruised face as she spoke clearly and directly. 3 nights ago, I was driving home from work when I was pulled over, assaulted, and arrested without cause. What happened to me happens to countless others who don't have the privilege of a powerful parent or public attention. Today, I'm announcing the formation of the Justice Accountability Project, which will work to document cases of police misconduct and advocate for policy changes to prevent future abuses. Questions erupted from the press corps, but Danielle continued. This isn't about punishing individual officers. It's about changing a system that allows abuse to happen with no consequences. I invite anyone who has experienced or witnessed police misconduct to share their stories on the website we're launching today. As they left the press conference, General Wilson's phone rang. He answered, listened briefly, then handed it to Danielle. It's the White House, he said quietly. Danielle took the phone, surprised. This is Danielle Wilson. Ms. Wilson, this is President Harlow. I've been following your story and wanted to speak with you personally. Danielle listened as the president expressed concern about her experience and mentioned possible federal action on police reform. Thank you, Mr. President, she replied when he finished. But with all due respect, we've heard promises of reform before. What we need now is action. That evening, Danielle appeared on a national news program, speaking calmly and thoughtfully about her experience and the changes she hoped to see. The interview went viral, with clips shared millions of times across social media platforms. Back at her apartment afterward, she sat with her father on the balcony, both of them quiet after the whirlwind day. You did well, he said finally. Your mother would be proud. Danielle smiled slightly, though it hurt her still healing lip. I keep thinking about what she used to say. That change happens when the right person is in the wrong place at the right time. Her father nodded. She was wise that way. Dad, Danielle said after another moment of silence. I need to tell you something. The officers who arrested me, their records show previous complaints of excessive force, all dismissed. One had 5 complaints in 3 years. Her father's expression darkened. The department knew they were problems and did nothing. Worse than that, Danielle said. After the 3rd complaint, he was promoted. General Wilson stood and walked to the railing, looking out over the city lights. The military isn't perfect, he said. We've had our share of cover-ups and failures. But we have systems of accountability that mostly work. When they don't, people die. People are dying here too, Dad. He turned back to her. I know, and I think I can help, beyond just being your father. The next morning, a series of revelations hit the news. The body camera footage, previously reported as malfunctioned, had been recovered from server backups. It showed clearly that Danielle had not resisted arrest or assaulted the officers. Additionally, internal police department emails were leaked, revealing that supervisors had been aware of previous complaints against the officers, but had taken no action. The mayor called an emergency press conference, announcing that all 3 officers had now been suspended without pay, pending criminal investigation. He also committed to implementing several of the policy changes Danielle had proposed, including the Civilian Review Board. Public pressure works, Tanya Washington told Danielle when they met later that day at the coalition's office. But we need to keep it up. The media spotlight won't last forever. Danielle nodded. That's why we need to document as many cases as possible while people are paying attention. Their website had received over 300 submissions in just 24 hours, people from across Memphis sharing their experiences with police misconduct, many with video or photographic evidence. Carlos pulled up a map on his computer. We've plotted all the incidents by location, he explained. There's a clear pattern of excessive force complaints concentrated in certain neighborhoods, predominantly Black and Latino communities. Danielle studied the map. This is powerful evidence. We need to get this to the Department of Justice. Already done, her father said as he entered the room. I just got off the phone with the Attorney General. They're opening a pattern or practice investigation into the Memphis Police Department. The news spread quickly. By that afternoon, police reform activists from other cities were reaching out, asking for help replicating the Justice Accountability Project in their communities. That evening, as Danielle prepared for another interview, she received a text message from an unknown number. I'm Officer Lynn Parker with Memphis PD. Not all of us are like those 3. Some of us want change too. There are more records you should see. Can we meet? Danielle stared at her phone, considering the possibilities. This could be a trap, or it could be the breakthrough they needed, allies within the department itself. She showed the message to her father. It's risky, he said, but sometimes you need to work from the inside and the outside to change a system. Danielle typed a reply. Yes, but not alone. Tomorrow, noon at my lawyer's office. As she sent the message, she knew they were entering a new phase of the fight. The story wasn't just about her anymore. It had grown beyond the general's daughter to become something larger, a movement building momentum with each passing day. The question now was whether that momentum could be sustained long enough to create lasting change. 6 months had passed since that night at the intersection of Pine and Jefferson. The bruises on Danielle's face had long since faded, but the changes set in motion by her arrest continued to ripple outward. Today, she stood at the podium in City Hall's main chamber, where the mayor was signing the Police Accountability Act into law. The room was packed with community members, activists, reporters, and city officials. Her father sat in the front row, watching with quiet pride. This legislation represents a new beginning for police-community relations in Memphis, Mayor Lewis announced, his political instincts having led him to embrace reform once he saw which way the wind was blowing. With independent oversight, transparent disciplinary procedures, and mandatory de-escalation training, we're creating a model for cities across the nation. What he didn't mention was the months of hard work, heated negotiations, and public pressure that had made this moment possible. Danielle thought back to the day after her meeting with city officials, when she'd sat across from Officer Lynn Parker in her lawyer's office. Parker had been a 14-year veteran of the force, a white woman in her 40s with tired eyes and a firm handshake. She'd brought with her a flash drive containing years of internal communications about officer misconduct complaints. I joined to help people, she'd explained. But the culture, it protects the wrong officers. Good cops who speak up get pushed out. Bad ones get promoted. The evidence she provided had been damning, showing how complaints were systematically downgraded or dismissed, how officers with multiple incidents were shuffled between precincts rather than disciplined, how the department's leadership maintained a blue wall of protection around even the worst offenders. Parker had known she was risking her career, but as she'd told Danielle, I have a teenage daughter. I look at what happened to you, and I think that could be her someday. That flash drive had become the backbone of the Department of Justice investigation and had helped the Justice Accountability Project build an irrefutable case for reform. Now, as the mayor finished his speech and invited Danielle to the podium, she thought about how much had changed and how much hadn't. Thank you. Mayor Lewis, she began, looking out at the audience. 6 months ago I was driving home from work when I was pulled over, thrown to the ground and beaten by police officers who were supposed to protect and serve. What happened to me that night wasn't unique or unusual. The only unusual thing was that I had the resources and platform to fight back. She paused, making eye contact with Tanya and Carlos from the Civil Rights Coalition, who stood at the back of the room. This legislation is an important step forward, but it's just one step. Laws are only as good as their enforcement. Policies only matter if they're followed. The real work of change happens not in ceremonies like this one, but in daily interactions between officers and the communities they serve. In the months since her arrest, Danielle had become a recognizable face of police reform. She'd appeared on national news programs, testified before Congress, and spoken at community forums across the country. The Justice Accountability Project had expanded to 12 cities, documenting patterns of misconduct and advocating for systemic changes. The 3 officers who had arrested her had been fired and charged with assault and civil rights violations. Their trial was scheduled to begin next month. The police union had initially defended them vigorously, but as more evidence emerged, that support had quietly faded. True justice isn't about punishment, Danielle continued. It's about creating systems that treat everyone with dignity and respect, regardless of their race, income, or connections. It's about accountability that prevents harm rather than simply responding to it after the fact. She glanced at her father, who nodded slightly. My father taught me that leadership means taking responsibility, not just for your actions, but for the culture you create. The culture within our police departments needs to change, and that change must come from within as well as from outside pressure. After the ceremony, Danielle found herself surrounded by well-wishers and reporters. She answered questions patiently, emphasizing that today's victory belonged to the community organizers who had been fighting for these changes long before her case made headlines. As the crowd thinned, a young black woman approached her hesitantly. She couldn't have been more than 20. Ms. Wilson, I just wanted to thank you, she said quietly. The same thing happened to my brother 2 years ago, but nobody believed him. No charges were ever filed against the officers. Your story helped our family feel less alone. Danielle took the young woman's hands in hers. What's your brother's name? Andre, he's still dealing with the trauma. Tell Andre his story matters, Danielle said. And if he ever wants to share it, the Justice Accountability Project is here to listen. Later that evening, Danielle and her father had dinner at her apartment. She had moved to a new building after her address had been leaked online, leading to both supportive gatherings and threatening messages outside her old place. The new apartment had better security, but it still didn't feel quite like home. The DOJ is expanding its investigation to 3 more cities, her father said as they ate. Your work is making waves, Danielle. She pushed her food around her plate. Sometimes it feels like we're just scratching the surface. For every policy change, there's resistance. For every officer held accountable, there are dozens who aren't. Her father set down his fork. When I was a young lieutenant, I was sent to assess a combat situation that had gone wrong. Our forces had been in the area for years with little progress. I asked my commanding officer how we were supposed to fix something so broken. Do you know what he told me? Danielle shook her head. He said, you eat an elephant one bite at a time. It wasn't particularly profound, but it stuck with me. Big problems don't get solved all at once. I know, Danielle sighed. It's just, I keep thinking about all the people who don't get justice, who don't have a general for a father or a video that goes viral. That's why what you're doing matters, he said. You're using your privilege to create space for those voices. Her phone buzzed with a notification. Another city, Cleveland this time, had just announced the formation of a civilian oversight board modeled after the one in Memphis. One bite at a time, she murmured. The next morning, Danielle visited the community center in North Memphis where the Justice Accountability Project had established its headquarters. What had started as a small operation with just her, Tanya, and Carlos had grown into an organization with 15 full-time staff and dozens of volunteers. The main room buzzed with activity. People logged complaints, analyzed data, and coordinated with legal aid services. On one wall hung a large map of Memphis with pins marking incidents of police misconduct. On another, photos showed community engagement events, know your rights workshops, forums with reform-minded officers, youth leadership programs. Tanya greeted her with a quick hug. Big day today. The police academy starts the new training program. This had been one of their most significant victories, a complete overhaul of how new officers were trained, with emphasis on de-escalation, mental health response, and community relationship building. Even more importantly, they had secured a role for community members in the training process. Is everything ready? Danielle asked. As ready as it can be. Some of the old guard instructors aren't happy about it, but Chief Rodriguez is backing us. Chief Rodriguez had emerged as a surprising ally in recent months. Once freed from political constraints by the public pressure for reform, she had pushed for changes within the department that she had apparently wanted for years. What about the ride-along program? Danielle asked. This was another initiative, pairing community observers with patrol officers to increase transparency and build mutual understanding. It had been controversial on both sides, with some officers viewing it as surveillance and some community members seeing it as co-optation. Starting next week, we've got 20 officers who volunteered and 30 community participants. Danielle nodded. That's something at least. As they talked, a group of teenagers arrived for a youth leadership meeting. They were part of a program that created dialogue between young people and police officers, working to break down the mutual distrust that had built up over generations. Watching them file in, laughing and talking among themselves, Danielle felt a wave of hope. These kids were growing up in a city that was at least trying to address its problems, however imperfectly. Later that day, she visited the memorial that had been erected at Pine and Jefferson, a simple plaque that read, "On this spot in 2025, a movement for justice was born. May we never stop working toward a community where every person is treated with dignity and respect." It wasn't just about her anymore. It never had been, really. Her case had simply been the spark that ignited long-simmering demands for change. As she stood there, a patrol car pulled up to the curb. Her heart still jumped whenever she saw police lights, a reaction that might never fully fade. Officer Lynn Parker stepped out, now wearing a sergeant's uniform. After the internal documents she had provided led to reforms, she had faced hostility from some colleagues but had ultimately been promoted as part of the department's new leadership. "Thought I might find you here," Parker said, walking over to stand beside Danielle. "Just reflecting," Danielle replied. "The new recruits start community immersion tomorrow," Parker said. 24 of them. Good kids, most of them, different from how we were trained. "Do you think it will stick?" Danielle asked. "The changes, I mean." Parker was quiet for a moment. "Some will, some won't. Culture doesn't change overnight, but it's changing." As they stood there, a young patrol officer drove by, slowing when he saw them. He nodded respectfully before continuing on his route. 3 years ago, he would have been taught to see community activists as the enemy, Parker said. "Now you're part of his training. That matters." That evening, Danielle spoke at a town hall meeting about the next phase of reforms. The room was packed with people from across the city. Black, white, Latino, Asian, old and young, wealthy and working class. "The work of justice is never finished," she told them. "What happened to me was just one incident in a long history. The changes we've made are just the beginning of a longer journey." She thought about how a single traffic stop had altered the course of her life, bringing her from the comfortable world of environmental law into this new role. She thought about the young woman whose brother had suffered without anyone believing him, and about all the others whose stories would never make headlines. "We have a choice," she concluded. "We can turn away from difficult truths, or we can face them together and build something better. I choose to build." I hope you'll join me." As the audience rose in applause, Danielle knew that whatever came next, whether progress or setbacks, victories or disappointments, she was exactly where she needed to be. The general's daughter had found her own mission, her own kind of service. And somewhere in that crowd were the leaders who would carry the work forward long after today's headlines had faded, one small change at a time.